Well, good evening. I'm Eric Walker, Chair of Highlands Astronomical Society, and it's my pleasure to welcome HAS members and also visitors from our North of Scotland sister astronomy clubs, and also any first-time members, visitors who have contacted us wanting to see what we get up to at our monthly club meetings. Hopefully, there are a few folks from Stornoway Astronomical Society here tonight, and it would be great if you made your presence known in the chat box. Tonight's timings, after my welcome and notices, we'll have our main talk followed by the Q&A session. And then around about 8:30, we'll do our club news, astro picks and targets for the month. And then round about 5 to 9-ish, we'll do club member questions and answers, and that'll take us to the meeting close. As usual, there won't be any breaks during the meeting, so if you need to leave for any reason, just get up and go, but keep yourself connected to the meeting. Now, last month, we had a recording fail. You may have noticed that last month's meeting hasn't been put up on our YouTube channel yet. That's because the incompetent person who was responsible for recording the meeting forgot to push the record button at the start. I have been suitably reprimanded, and I've been given several ways of reminding me to do this simple task. Tonight's meeting is definitely being recorded as I speak. To put last month's failure to rights, Paul, Pauline and myself have all re-recorded our separate parts, and I'm in the process of editing them all together, so you will be able to view last month's meeting on YouTube after all. Last month, you might remember I put out an appeal for help, and I was looking to fill our vacant membership secretary position, and also was needing some IT technical support to develop our successful infant live observing webcast sessions. I'm pleased to be able to tell you that our new membership secretary is the very capable Lorraine Shepherd. Thank you very much for taking on that key role for us, Lorraine. And we're now also receiving IT technical support from Ashley Davidson. That's David's son. And this is proven to be a great help, judging by the feedback we've received from viewers of our most recent live observing webcast. And more on that later from Pauline. In addition, James Hitchmow, who I'm sure many of you will know, has been able to come back on the scene, and he's volunteered to be a key member of our observing team again. And he can't wait to plan and present some of our observing webcasts over this season. Welcome back, James. Now, the weather this month has been a bit variable and iffy, to say the least, but there have been some gaps in the dark skies over parts of North Scotland. And our enthusiastic observers and photographers have been let loose with a vengeance. As you'll see in Pauline's club news section, there's an absolute wealth of all types of astrophotos, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy looking at them. Live observing via webcast has and is being a great success. In addition to webcasting to our own and sister clubs members, we have been included in the forthcoming National Astronomy Week 2020 live observing evenings, 9 nights from Saturday the 14th November through to Sunday the 22nd of November inclusive. HAS is the only astronomy club north of the border getting involved in this event, so we'll endeavour to ensure that the North of Scotland Amateur Astronomy Association strives towards its goal of being recognised as a centre of amateur astronomy excellence. We'll email you and post more detailed updates on Facebook and our website nearer the time. Now, for your diaries, instead of us holding our normal December monthly meeting, Sigma are kindly doing all the technical support work and hosting an inter-club Christmas astronomy quiz on Friday, the 4th of December. This will be via Zoom, and we are looking to form several teams of 4 to 6 people from each club or group to have a friendly but competitive evening. If you could give this some quick thought, could you get in touch with me and or Pete to let us know whether you're able and willing to take part and how many people or teams you're likely to enter? If it works anything like the online Kaylee we did for Orkney International Science Festival, it will be a superbly entertaining evening. Again, we'll get the details to you later in the month. Enough from me. I'm now going to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Melissa Thorpe. Melissa is the main liaison for industry, military, government, media, public and schools for Spaceport Cornwall, the UK's first horizontal launch site. Together with launch partner Virgin Orbit, yes, that Virgin, Melissa works across the launch environment to efficiently secure investment and support, while communicating the space story to a wider demographic. Originally from Canada, Melissa moved to the UK to attend the London School of Economics in 2010. Since then, she's worked on several aerospace development projects and has been part of the Spaceport Cornwall team since its inception in 2014. Some of you may remember a presentation to our club a few months ago from Matchas Vidmar, who discussed the options around the proposed spaceport locations in Scotland. Melissa's talk takes us about as far south of the border as you can get. And it's with great pleasure that I welcome Melissa tonight. Here she is to talk about Spaceport Cornwall, launching the UK to space.
Hi, good evening. I'm hoping that you can hear me because I think Eric just cut off there. It was put on mute, I would say. So hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Melissa Thorpe. As Eric mentioned, I'm from Spaceport Cornwall. So as far south as you can get, southwest in the UK as you can get. Obviously, my accent isn't very Cornish. I am from Canada. And I grew up in a very rural part of Canada, kind of in the foothills of the Rockies near British Columbia. And I grew up with big skies. So really, spent my childhood looking up at the stars and actually wanted to go into astronomy when I was younger. Unfortunately, a teacher told me that there wasn't many options where I lived to do that career. So I changed what I wanted to do and actually ended up going into economics and really focus on aerospace and marketplaces and how different businesses and commercial enterprises were using their aerospace clusters to develop economies and communities around the world. I focus quite a bit on Airbus and Boeing, but that was my background. I always actually wanted to be a pilot. My dad flies water bombers, fighting forest fires, but fortunately my eyesight wasn't very good. So again, another career that didn't happen. But here I am working in space and aerospace with an airplane, which I'll come on to in my talk. But that's me. I moved down to Cornwall 10 years ago. And I started working at the airport, Cornwall Airport, Newquay, looking at how to develop it in different areas other than just passenger services. So I initially kind of started with looking at unmanned systems and testing of unique aircraft, search and rescue with Bristow's Aviation, and maintenance, repair and overhaul. So looking at kind of aerospace activity. And then Spaceport came knocking quite unexpectedly. But what a ride it's been. So that was in 2014. So 6 years later, I'm still here. And I'm just going to talk to you guys tonight about that journey. You've obviously heard from some of the Scottish sites in the past and being where you are. I heard Stornoway mentioned, and last night we were talking about Shetland and Sutherland. We know them very well. And this isn't about me pitching why Cornwall's better than any of those sites. What this is all about is providing a launch capability for the UK. So working together in the UK to provide that, to basically be competitive in a global marketplace. So I'm just going to really introduce you to Cornwall and the spaceport in Cornwall and how it's very different than what's going on up in Scotland. A little bit about our journey thus far, but also mainly just looking at the future, because you know everything we do right now is looking towards moving this project forward to deliver that launch. So I've just moved into a new house and hopefully my broadband just got set up yesterday. So hopefully it's up for this. Paul's gonna skip through my slides for me, which thank you very much again, Paul, for that. And so unfortunately every time I'll just be like, next slide, please. But stick with me and hopefully you'll learn quite a bit. And I'm really looking forward to the questions at the end, because that's definitely my favorite bit. But hands up, I'm not an astronomer. I'm not an astrophysicist. So keep that in mind with your questions, because you probably know a lot more about that than I do. I'm very niche in what I know about space. So let's start. Next slide, please. Space is changing. What's happened in the industry is quite astonishing, actually. So you've gone from very state government-led programs over the years, from the Apollo shuttle mission, you know, the Cold War era of Russia versus the US and the race to the moon. So it's heavily funded by governments. And of course, that's still happening now. But what you're seeing is this massive move towards commercialization. So you're seeing private companies, entrepreneurs, coming into the marketplace because they see an opportunity, money to be made from space for various different reasons and purposes. But this has caused quite an interesting dynamic in the industry, in that all of them require access to space. So you're seeing this commercialization of the industry, and at the same time, you're seeing this demand going up for accessing space, something that was restricted to a very few spaces or places around the world, and that restriction is now creating a bottleneck in the industry. So it's called the launch bottleneck, and it basically means that there's more demand now for launch than there ever has been before. And that's what brings us into the story. So you'll see at the end there, the likes of these entrepreneurs, Elon Musk with SpaceX, Jeff Bezos from Amazon with Blue Origin, and Richard Branson, Virgin Orbit, who I'll talk about in a minute. But these private players coming into the marketplace, which is very exciting, but has its challenges. But for us here in the UK, this has created a big opportunity. Next slide, please. This is just to show, you won't be able to read it all, but it's just a graph to show that this demand in launch and where it's coming from. So the top bar there is all looking at government funded launches, so the state providing the launch capability. And from kind of the early to mid 90s, what you're seeing is quite a big boom in commercial launch providers, so private corporations providing launch for the first time. So more recently, obviously SpaceX working with NASA to provide launch. And that's just growing and growing and growing. So it's just to show that this move away from just state funding launches to now commercial enterprises. Next slide. As I mentioned, historically launch were few and far between, very far. And you think, you know, traditional vertical launch, vast remote coastal locations. However, because the demand's going up for launch, you're now looking at that demand changing. They're wanting lower cost access to space. So they don't want to spend their entire launch program just on the launch itself. They want that kind of design and build capabilities all to be one place. And they want dedicated launch. At the minute, you book a slot, you ride share, unless you're a big company, and that has issues because you could get bumped off at the last minute. And they also want well-connected locations. So these companies that you see below, these private companies, they want to show off their capability to the satellites that they're launching, or humans in the future into space. So they want people to have access to the location. So these vast sites, remote sites, are not necessarily what some of these companies are looking for anymore. Some of them are, but a lot of them are starting to look for something that's a bit more flashy, a bit more easy to get to. Next slide, please. And this is basically what brings us into the story. in 2014, well, before that, a few years before, the UK government identified a market opportunity. So the UK actually builds a large majority of the world's small satellites, but we can't launch them from the UK. So major clusters of satellite around Harwell and Edinburgh, Glasgow, they at the minute are shipping their satellites overseas to launch. And what that's done is create a bit of an issue for UK satellite companies, because like I said, they could transport all their kit overseas, wait for their launch, but the ride share, they might get bumped off by a larger company or by a space agency, a government agency. And they might have to wait a long time for the next launch. And that means for their business, that's not great. So the UK government wanted to create a launch capability in the UK to capture that marketplace for these companies, but also in the UK, but also in Europe, and get into that launch game and become quite that selective club of launch nations as well. That historically the UK are a heavy hitter in space. We actually did have a launch capability with the Black Arrow program 50 years ago, but that was unfortunately a fun fact, but a bit of a sad fact. It's the only launch program that launched once, proved it could do it, and then was completely scrapped of any nation. So they launched in Australia, and it proved they could launch, but then decided to not continue with the program. So it's bringing UK launch back into play. So the UK Space Agency got in touch with several sites around the UK, as you can see there on the map. Most of them are up your way. And those are a mixture of vertical launch, so historical from the ground up to space, and horizontal launch, which in a way is a bit of a new technology. And that's using existing runways and airports to launch in the air. So we were shortlisted as one of these sites. We had no idea. We were just approached just before Farnborough Air Show in 2014 that, oh, congratulations, you've been shortlisted as a spaceport. And it kind of just went into chaos after that. It was quite a funny situation because they almost pitched us all against each other, and it became this weird competitive thing of who has the longest runway or the most hours of sunlight, which between Scotland and Cornwall isn't that much, who has the clearest airspace around it. So the UK Space Agency basically just did a desktop exercise of coastal locations, runway lengths, or ability to build a pad, low residential buildup and things like that, and came up with these sites. We're the only site in England. And that's what's been quite interesting. Obviously, the Scottish Assembly has been very powerful in this and very supportive of a UK spaceport in Scotland. We don't have an English Assembly, so we've relied quite heavily on Cornwall Council to be that voice for us at Westminster. So that's a different dynamic for us down here in Cornwall. So initially it was a joint call. It was a joint call from UK Space Agency to all these spaceports saying, what we don't want is a build it, they will come. They wanted us to go out to industry, find an operator, launch partner, and come back to them. And so we all went out and did that. And basically, long story short, they came back to 2 sites officially at the minute. Sutherland, which is the horizontal launch site, initially was with Lockheed and Orbex, and down here in Cornwall, horizontal launch site with Virgin Orbit. And obviously I'll be talking to you guys about that. So that's where we are. All those other spaceports are still active in one way or another. They're looking at different technologies, different operators, but they're all still in the game. And again, it's all about working together. We're all part of a spaceport group. And we talk pretty much weekly, I would say, about how we're going to move this forward. So the Space Industry Act went through Parliament in 2018. It was meant to go through this spring, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic, it has been delayed. But we have just consulted on it for the secondary legislation, and that's basically to allow spaceflight in the UK for the first time ever. So it's the safety and the regulations behind how we're going to do this. And that's basically the last big piece of the puzzle for us here in Cornwall, is getting that regulation through, understanding what they expect from us to be able to safely launch to space, especially from an airport, which is a different dynamic to launching from a peat bog in Scotland. So very each site is different and has its own challenges and its own strengths. And we've had to go back to the UK Space Agency and say, this is how we think this legislation fits with us. So that's pretty much where we are at the minute in regards to the kind of the background of this. UK want to launch, and we're here to give it to them with our partners. Next slide, please. And this is us. So we are a consortium, which is made up of Cornwall Airport, Newquay, Virgin Orbit, and Goonhilly Earth Station. So we're basically a group that's trying to move this forward. Cornwall Airport, Newquay, which is who I'm really working for, is Spaceport Cornwall, and that's the site, the infrastructure needed for launch. Virgin Orbit is our launch partner, so they're the actual launch system with the rocket, and Goonhilly Earth Station are our mission control, tracking and monitoring of the data to bring it back down. So that's our glorious partnership and our wider launch family. The airport itself is owned by Cornwall Council and was purchased by the MOD back in the early 2000s. So Cornwall Council owned asset. If you think about it as where the airport's the bus stop, Virgin is the bus, the passengers sit on the rocket, and Goonhilly are kind of the traffic controller, and they kind of let everybody know what's going on once the passengers are up there. Next slide, please. So that's our site. That's Cornwall Airport, Newquay. It's an ex-MOD RAF site from the Cold War, mainly. So we have a lot of existing infrastructure around that we actually have repurposed for Spaceport. But it is actually, before COVID, was it was the fastest growing regional airport in the UK. So it is, daily flights to London and Portugal and Spain. It's quite an active little airport. We've got search and rescue. We've got an air ambulance. We've got a fixed base operator with Western Aviation. We've got a big maintenance repair and overhaul system. We've got a heritage aviation museum there. We had the Bloodhound supersonic car testing up and down the runway a few years ago. So we have a lot of things going on at the airport itself. And what we're doing that's quite different is integrating space launch into all those other things. So we'll be the first airport in the entire world to integrate space launch into it. So a civilian airport that's operational will be integrating launch, which is actually quite exciting for the UK to show that that can be done. We still have the military base adjacent to us. They just don't have complete access to the runway anymore. So we do still do military operations there, but it's all under a civil operations manual. As you can see there, we're pretty much end of the runway. You go direct over Morganforth Beach. And the runway itself is about 2,744 meters licensed. We have about 3,000 unlicensed. So it's a long runway that fit with the Virgin requirements. So that's the site just outside of Newquay. Great connectivity onto the A30 and then at M5. So it's fantastic for moving cargo around or future satellites. Next slide, please. And this is our partner. This is Virgin Orbit. As Eric said, is Richard Branson. He owns two space companies, Virgin Orbit and Virgin Galactic. A lot of people know about Virgin Galactic, which is the human space flight element of his space program. And that's about taking civilians. People say tourists. Yes, tourists will be there, but it's starting to change that dynamic. It's looking at more academic research. So things like doctors going up to test their cancer research is quite amazing what they're able to do with Virgin Galactic. So they're based out of Spaceport America. And this is Virgin Orbit, which is their small satellite launcher. And they're based in Long Beach in California. And basically the system consists of two parts. Cosmic Girl, which is the name of Boeing 747 that's been modified. And Launcher One, which is a 70-foot two-stage rocket that sits under one of her wings. So she was an ex-Virgin Atlantic airliner based out of Gatwick, actually. And she was modified at a price tag of about $1 billion for the R&D to do this. So it's not just a rocket strapped under her wing. It's a lot of amazing technology that's gone into creating this air launch system. And air launch basically means that they'll go down to the end of our runway, take off over the sea, go up to about 35,000 feet, drop the rocket. That rocket will then deploy into low Earth orbit and deliver its payload. So small satellite launch, about 200 to 300 kilos of satellite. And that's anything from, you know, a bunch of little microsatellites or nanosats to the size of a fridge freezer. So these aren't massive satellites. These are small satellites, which is where the market is really booming at the minute, is the growth in small satellites. We have been working with Virgin for pretty much since the beginning. We didn't chase them, but they have a lot of potential clients and customers in Europe. They were looking for a site that they could easily operate a 747 out of safely. And they had us on our list even, you know, before. So it was a kind of a match made before we even got on the journey. And since then, we worked very closely with the Virgin team. I was lucky enough to go out to the rocket factory in Long Beach last year. It's an incredible organization with some of the top scientists, rocket scientists, and it's just an incredible program to be involved with. And you know, the skill level that they have there is just is incredible, and they're going to be bringing that over here to the UK. So we have secured 20 million to provide our launch capability. And I know 20 million is a lot of money, but actually in the space game, to create a launch facility is nothing. You know, if you look at some of the other spaceports, commercial spaceports, especially the Spaceport America or some of the ones in Russia, they're, you know, hundreds of millions. So for Cornwall to be able to provide the UK with a launch facility for 20 million, we think is a pretty good deal. We're looking at our first launch in 2022, first quarter of 22. It was meant to be end of next year, but due to those regulations I was talking about earlier being delayed, that's kind of had a knock-on effect to our program, a launch program. But we're all still on track. Other than the regulations, we haven't really had many delays with how we're going down the program. So it's been an interesting journey so far dealing with Virgin. They're, as you know, Richard Branson, everybody knows. But for us, it's been nothing but FaceTime call, one of calls from Canada. So that's my mom. Sorry about that. And what this system does, there's only one of them, and they are mobile platforms. So that basically means they're going to be looking at going around the world. So at the minute, satellite companies have to come to a launch site to be launched. What Virgin are doing and how they're disrupting the marketplace is they're actually bringing the launch to the customer base. So they have their main launch base in Mojave in California. That's their American hub. Their next hub will be us over here in Cornwall, and that's going to be their European hub. They also have a site in Guam, Japan. They're looking at Australia. So they're going to have a network of sites around the world that they will be able to come and deliver launch to. So it's a different business than just having a specific one launcher in one site. Next slide, please. That's just a quick image. I usually show a video, but on Zoom, it's so hit and miss. So what I'll do maybe is send through the link to the video, or you can go on YouTube and see it. But how it works, like I said, is it goes up to about 35,000 feet, drops the rocket, and that rocket then ignites and goes up to low Earth orbit. So this image is from their last dress rehearsal out in Mojave. It was bank holiday weekend at the end of May. And it was their first real attempt at doing it. So they haven't launched yet. I should have said that before. But this was their last dress rehearsal, and they dropped the rocket and it ignited, but it stopped. There was a fueling issue with propellant, and they had to ditch the rocket. And it was massively disappointing to all of us that happened, but this is space. You know, Elon Musk quickly tweeted to them, you know, how many times SpaceX failed before it first happened. And they have 2 rockets now ready to go, and they're ready to do their first launch in the coming weeks. And that is a fully loaded payload with NASA, actually. So if NASA believe in the technology, we're pretty confident that it should be good. So look out for their first actual launch, which will be incredibly exciting because it's such a different way of launching, and it is probably the future of launch, of taking the rocket almost halfway there. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've just put this up because I'm just going to now go into why are we doing this. Obviously, creating a launch capability is hugely exciting. And I know talking to a group of astronomers, space and getting closer to it in any way that we can, and starting to learn more about what's out there is huge. And for the UK to be able to offer that here in the UK is exciting enough. But actually, what we've realized in the last 6 years is the ancillary benefits of creating a launch capability in the UK are massive. And this is a really complicated screen to be showing you, but what I wanted to do is to show that we have looked at every way that we could get benefit for the UK from creating this launch, working with Virgin and the Scottish site. So I'm just going to go through some things that you've probably not considered before, and how we fit into it and how we're doing it quite differently. And maybe it will just spark you to have a look at the sites in Scotland and see how they're doing it up there for you guys as well, because it is about involving the local community. This isn't just a big American corporation coming in or a Russian corporation to do launch. This is, you know, the UK really wanting to spread the benefits out from beyond just the site itself. Next slide, please. So for instance, why are we doing this? Well, we're looking at developing an entire UK supply chain around launch. This is the Virgin system, like I talked about, but all the trucks and lorries you see beside it there, that's actually where the value is. Those are all what we call the transportable ground operation system. So all of that is actually a lot of the value. And the UK Space Agency have an agreement with Virgin that all of that will be procured and provided in the UK by UK companies. So we have had a procurement call out for tier 1 companies, as well as tier 2 and 3 suppliers for Virgin, to look at how they're all going to build this capability in the UK. So that's UK businesses and UK jobs, you know, with the launch. So it's not like at the minute we're not building the 747 in the UK. That's something that will come in the future. But what we're doing is building that skill and that capability of how we're going to do this going forward as the market continues to grow and capture that. So we're already doing this. Hopefully there'll be an announcement next week, I think, of who they're going to be going with. But everything from Airbus providing some of the things that they're needed, down to, we had a local supply chain day down here. So a marine company that usually uses their filtration system for marine environment going, oh, wait a minute, actually, we can't do that in space. We're used to working in extreme environments. Well, what if we look at how we can use that for a space system? So that's quite exciting, and the value there is incredible. Next slide, please. Jobs, I'm sure you've heard quite a bit from the Scottish sites about job creation. We're looking at about 150 jobs in Cornwall. We expect 80 of those jobs to come from people that are already living in Cornwall, and the rest will have to be brought in. And that's just mainly because our skill base at the minute isn't quite there. Obviously, we're a very traditional rural economy, heavily reliant on agriculture and fishing. So to build up that space industry will take time. But that map there, I'm sorry, you won't be able to read the names, but that's to show that all the businesses already in Cornwall that are using space technology for their business. So anything from satellite application developers to FLAN microwave systems to Avanti Communications to, we have an amazing company out in the middle of nowhere on the Roseland that is using satellite monitoring to track the growth of refugee camps and is working with the UN on that. So any company that uses space technology is a space company. And what we're trying to do with Spaceport, like I said in the last slide with the procurement process with Virgin, is to think about maybe how do they get involved in space? Can their widget or their personnel be trained to do something a bit different, to take advantage of this massively growing marketplace and to take advantage of the spotlight, because being a space launch location, as you'll find in Scotland, gets media attention. So how do we act as a catalyst to kind of bring attention to the rest of the cluster down here in Cornwall based around Goonhilly as well? That's one of our hardened aircraft shelters. So Cold War built, and what I mentioned before about repurposing it, we actually had a Scottish rocket company in there, last year. Skyrora, who I'm sure many of you might know of, they're an amazing company that we have a great relationship with. And they actually came to do some of their rocket testing down with us in one of our, because those are perfectly made for testing rockets and engines. So not only are we looking at launching, we're also looking at that whole, that whole piece of how do we test propellants and engines as well. So we have this entire kind of space cluster that we're trying to form as well down here. It's not just about launch, it's about using launch to kind of spur the rest of the industry. Next slide, please. This is one of my kind of passion projects, I would say. So we went through a very interesting process, as I know they did in Sutherland. We went to Cornwall Council. I mentioned the 20 million that we secured. 12 million of that was Cornwall Council local funding. And we went through quite an onerous process for that, which, of course is expected. But unfortunately, that process started about a month after Cornwall Council declared a climate emergency. And instantly, the attention was on us. How can you fund a spaceport when you called a climate emergency? And it was quite a rough ride. We had Extinction Rebellion. It was the height of all the protests, questioning every little thing we were doing. So as a team, actually, it was a good experience because it's made us think very differently about our activities. We are Cornwall Council. We are publicly funded. We have to represent the local taxpayers down here. And also the global community and that push for, what are we doing about climate change? So I've now been all over just researching and talking on panels and discussing, what is space role in fighting climate change and what is a spaceport's role in that? So for instance, we know that space provides amazing technology. If you know anything about space and satellites, you know that our daily lives are more efficient because of satellites. And the more that we can get up there that are better equipped for specific things to do with the environment, the more we can look at how we fight climate change. So Earth observation, or even in healthcare, from GPS to it crosses everything. I'm still blown away by all the technology that's being used, especially in the environment fight against climate change. So the technology is doing all these incredible things, but there's this weird irony that these incredible satellites are being launched in some pretty ugly ways. So that picture there, I'm sure many of you have seen, was from the beginning of lockdown back in March of Italy. And it kind of went viral because it showed a satellite image of the carbon emissions over Italy before and after lockdown, and obviously the impact that humans staying inside had, or didn't have, I guess, on the environment. And that was really powerful and actually influenced policymakers in Italy, places like Venice. They looked at different kinds of tourism going forward. So the real-time, unbiased information that these satellite images provide is just incredible. The issue with this picture is it was taken by the Copernicus satellite program, Sentinel-5, and that was actually built in the UK, that specific satellite, which was made for monitoring exactly this. However, it was shipped all the way out to Russia and launched in Russia. Now, I've tried to find out quite a bit about the launch and the impact of that launch, and what's their ethical plan out in Russia at their spaceport. Do they engage with the local community? Do they create jobs? How do they treat their employees? And I couldn't find anything. If any of you can, send it my way. So the transparency of how these satellites, or how these rockets are launching and the satellites on board, this was on an ballistic missile. So it's doing great things for the environment, but the way it's being done is a bit strange. And I think space has enjoyed a level of secrecy over the years because it's a bit hard to understand and people don't really quite grasp how things are done. And it's exciting, but they don't really want to know the detail. And I think that's changing because of the commercialization, because the public becoming more aware and switched on about the impact of rocket launches. And we saw it firsthand. We had protesters outside of our meetings. We were personally harassed online by environmentalists, and I took every opportunity I could to sit down with them and listen to their concerns and talk to them about why we're going to be doing this differently in Cornwall. So we are on the journey to becoming the most sustainable launch location in the world, because we are not only transparent about the impact of our launches. You can find it on our website. It's all there to see at the height of every launch that we do with Virgin. What will that impact be, and then what's our plan to lower that impact, not necessarily offset it, but look at how do we bring that number down. So we have worked with UK Space Agency over the last few months. We've got a sustainability action plan coming. I've been working on the ethical framework. So what's the role of a spaceport in what we launch, and what countries maybe we're working with on that. So it's just asking these questions that I don't think have really been asked before. And I feel that Cornwall and hopefully the UK feel like we can take a global lead on this and maybe start to look at this differently. And I'm happy to challenge the space industry to start to take this really seriously, because we've been at the pointy end of it, that I think it is fair enough. And I think, for us, it's about telling the story about space and what it can do, but also say that we're looking at how we can do it better. And that's as I said, as I'm sure you can tell, that is definitely my passion. So space for good, launch for good. Next slide, please. My other passion is inspiring the next generation. So that graph there shows the Apollo program. And the uptake of STEM subjects in the US during the Apollo program. The Apollo program didn't have an outreach dynamic to it. They weren't going into schools and trying to inspire them. This just naturally happened because kids were inspired by just the fact that they were going to the moon. So we have taken this, we're working with the likes of Tim Peake, and we're looking at how can we use space launch to inspire. And you guys up in Scotland and us down here in Cornwall, there are some very poor areas and very deprived areas of our county. There's children that have never even seen the sea, and they live a few miles away from it. The aspiration level down here is pretty dire. That's why we've had EU funding for the last few decades, and for us to give them something, that this is going to be happening on their doorstep. It's not just about being an astronaut anymore. They can come and they can work on an aircraft that's going to launch a rocket to space. They can be an engineer. They can look at how do you grow food on the moon. They can look at, even the Space Force going in, into the military. So there's all these different ways that they can get involved in space. And I go into schools, I can't even tell you how many I've been into, because it's my favorite thing I get to do. And to see that, the excitement from the kids about space. And then when I tell them, well, you'll be able to come up and see it. And they just, they're just so excited. And the letters we get, and the parents and the teachers. So it's all been quite ad hoc up until this point. But we've just hired an outreach manager, and we're about to launch our official outreach program, which is really exciting. We're doing live webinars into the rocket factory in Long Beach. So, a little corner school can be live with a rocket engineer out in Long Beach. And we just think that in itself is one reason why we should be launching. And again, this is a huge piece for UK Space Agency and the Scottish sites as well, is how do we inspire children across the UK to really get into a STEM career, especially girls. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she's very girly, but at the same time she rocks her NASA t-shirt around with her tutu. And it's about showing them that, yeah, it is amazing. It is cool to be in a STEM career. So that's something that we think is massively important. Next slide. Oh, I think this is just to show you some of the letters that we've had. And we are about to go out, and our goal is to visit every single school, whether that's now virtually or in person in Cornwall, primary and secondary. And that's not only about telling them to go into space, but any kind of technical career as well. So we're working really closely with the colleges down here. We've actually started a space operations course at the local college. So it's already starting to happen, and they're seeing massive intake in that. Next slide, please. I just wanted to talk to you guys about the MOD. So we are partnered with Virgin, and Virgin are actually partnered with the UK MOD. Obviously, it can be a controversial subject, but I think by talking through what we're doing with them, it will probably become a bit more apparent of why this is really important for the UK. At the minute, the UK government obviously have assets in space, things that help us on our daily lives, from controlling our ATM machines to traffic monitoring to getting ambulances where they need to be faster, quicker, to getting our military kept safe abroad. And we've recently seen that some states are able to take down those assets. They are now showing capability of taking out our comm satellites. And if we wanted to replace those, it could take weeks. Things that could go wrong in that time are huge and probably not really worth thinking about. So what Virgin can do with this responsive launch. So I think I mentioned to you guys before, at the minute, all the satellites are shipped overseas. They have to wait to get on their launch. What Virgin are doing are bringing their launch system to them, but also you can book your slot onto the launch, and that's your slot. You get a dedicated launch. So it means it's responsive. So the MOD realized this about a 2 years ago, I think, and have partnered with Virgin, because what they realized is actually if something happens to one of their assets in space, we can now look at replacing that within 24 hours. And that's huge for the military to be able to replace their asset in space. And it's called the Artemis Project. You can look it up. It's a different one from the moon one. I don't know why they have to name these things the same, because it'd be confusing. But there's now quite an interesting relationship forming between the RAF and Virgin, and that dynamic of being able to replace satellites in space. And the MOD have recently announced the creation of the Space Force and the space strategy from MOD, and it's only growing. And it's about defending our assets in space and democracy in space. Fortunately, a little antidote for you, but I was at a conference, the biggest space conference in Colorado a few years ago, and it was all commercial and startups and isn't space great, and we can do all these amazing things for humanity. And then Vice President Mike Pence came on stage and said, space is the next war zone. And that's when they announced Space Force over in the US. I was at the thing and it was, whoa, okay. But that is happening. So the UK are looking at how do we defend that, because in that defense, by showing we can replace something in 24 hours, that actually acts as a deterrent for them to even not bother. And we're working with them on range control and surface ship coverage for launch as well. So it's quite interesting dynamic there. I was asked, that's a picture of me on board Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier last year, almost a year ago to the day, off the coast of Annapolis. And I was there to brief military on the system, but also I moderated a panel with the heads of the American Air Force and all the brass that you could imagine. And I challenged them because I think there's a lot of work to be done on how we do this together for democracy in space as well. So I don't know if I'll be invited back now, but it was an interesting experience, because that it is happening, and I think our role in defense and being a deterrent in space as part of the Five Eyes projects with some of the NATO nations is actually something that we need to really progress. Next slide, please. That's a timeline. Sorry, it's not great to read, but it's just to give you an idea. So the top bar there, the gray bit, 2020, that's kind of been shifted because of Corona. So we still have a long way to go for our first launch. A lot of that's getting the system over from the US and some of the trade agreements that we have to do with that. This is getting the regulations through, getting all the infrastructure on site. So that 12 million that we got from Cornwall Council, that's actually going into their own asset. None of that's going to Branson, which, despite what you may have heard of us lining Branson's pockets, none of the money is going to Virgin. It's actually going into the infrastructure on the airport to get it ready to be a spaceport. So things like runway lighting, strengthening taxiways, we're building a payload integration facility. And a lot of these things won't just be for the spaceport, but for the rest of the airport operations as well. So all that's actually on site now. We've started demolition works, and that's all underway. So there's still a journey to go, but we're still on track. There's been a few hiccups recently, but we've been at this for 6 years. It's not going to go anywhere soon. The government really wants it, and Cornwall really wants it. So despite what you may see in the media from time to time. This is all still happening and we're still on track. I think my final slide, please. In conclusion, we're here to provide that launch capability for the UK, and that's to lower the cost of accessing space by using a commercial operator, Virgin Orbit, to launch in 2022. Virgin's our anchor tenant, if you will. So we're also looking at other launch operators, which hopefully we'll be announcing in the coming year as well. So Virgin's just the start, and we're looking at other operators. And that's just securing the market in the UK. There's other sites in Europe. So people always ask us if we're competitive with Scotland. Well, no, because I think we have to join up and have a UK launch proposition to be competitive with some of the sites that are coming in Europe. So as long as we get in the next few years, we can secure that market. And there at the end, there is just complementing and working with the vertical launch in Scotland. So Shetland, and we have an MOU with, and Sutherland we work very closely with as well. So, you know, this is a UK launch proposition and something that we will need to have, because we offer different things to different markets and different trajectories and different facilities, that it only enhances the overall offer if we work together on this to take on the rest of the market. And I think that is it. So hopefully that wasn't too much of a deluge for you. If you have any questions beyond, you know, if you think of something in the next few days, please just send me an email or give me a call on my mobile. We're not in the office again. So yeah, more than happy to take questions now. And if there's anything,
thank you very much, Marcella. I've got lots of questions you'll be glad to know. If you just bear with me a wee minute. The first one is from Paul Jenkins. There is a lot of vertical launch activity going around the world, typically being New Zealand Rocket Labs Electron rocket launch last week. Will you be able to compete in terms of launch pricing?
Yeah, so that's why we're doing it. If we didn't think we could, we definitely wouldn't be here, because the pain and suffering of getting a launch facility, you have to be very confident in the market. The satellite marketplace, like I said, in the UK is growing, and all we're trying to do is to offer that here. So rather than satellites going all the way down to New Zealand to go off Electron, they can look at launching them here with Virgin. And so that really is more Virgin's business. They have to fill their payload. So they're the ones really in competition with Rocket Labs, not necessarily us. We're the bus stop, like I said. And Virgin obviously are very, very keen to get over to Europe because they see a big marketplace here.
Eric asks, how much does the UK taxpayer contribute to the development of this type of project? And how much will they contribute when it is up and running?
So as I said, so we've got a 20 million package, and about 12 million of that is taxpayer. But that is to get us up and get us that first launch. And then basically it's actually a loan, if you will. So we will be charging commercial fees, and we'll be revenue generating. We're looking, well, it depends now because of Corona how that shifted, but it was originally by year 5. So with charges and fees that we'll be charging to our operators, it will be revenue generating, and that will be something that goes back into Cornwall Council, that Cornwall Council charges because they're the owner of the airport. So yeah, 12 million to get a launch capability for the UK. And like I said, not only the launch capability, but all those other benefits itself. So we had to go through quite a onerous UK HM Treasury process. It's called the Green Book Appraisal. And that's any funded project basically has to go through this. It took us 6 months to get through it with every figure that you can imagine, that the amount of jobs we'd create is worth that amount of investment, basically. And we got through that.
Now, there's a question from me. Has the vote to leave the EU changed any aspects of your planning?
It's interesting because since the spaceport project started, we've had, I don't know how many different prime ministers, like 3 or 4. Brexit's happened, like everything. Originally we were supposed to launch in 2019, I think was the original goal. So a lot has changed, and I could sit here and say Brexit hasn't impacted. It's hard to know because we haven't launched. I think it'll be interesting to see the dynamic of the trade between Europe and the UK because of the satellites that we're trying to launch from Europe and how they come over here. But it has enhanced our relationship with the US. They are very pro-space over there. Obviously, we'll find out a little bit more in a few hours if that's still the case. But there's been quite a big political will between the US and the UK and that's helped us obviously because Virgin are based out in Long Beach. So it is hard to say if it's had a major hindrance on us yet. I know space with Galileo and some of the controversies around that has, and to be honest, we'll just have to see how we come out the other side of this pandemic as well, and Brexit once it hits. But at the minute, we haven't actually been massively impacted. We haven't used European funding at all for this program. So that hasn't been an impact yet on us either.
How do the locals generally feel about it?
That's been, again, a very interesting journey. At first, 6 years ago, everybody laughed at us and thought it was just, a vanity project and a white elephant. And, unfortunately, Cornwall's had a few of those in the past, especially with European funding. But I think once we've been out to the schools, we've had lots of open days and we've done as much community engagement all over the places as you can imagine. As soon as they start to read about the benefits, the conversation changes. We had quite a interesting public forum just before a big council decision about October last year, right by the airport, and we had all the locals come, and a lot of Extinction Rebellion came. And of course, we'll never convince them that it's a good thing. But what I want them to do is understand that what we're doing, is as transparent and honest. We're not hiding anything. So I still think there's a bit of disbelief down here, but I think the excitement was building a lot before Corona. We've got a global spotlight on Cornwall now. We've been in the New York Times in the last month. I was on BBC World News to 26 million people talking about launch in the UK. So I think that exposure for Cornwall is huge. And I think after the pandemic, to create jobs, high paid, sustainable jobs will only be a good thing as well.
I think quite a lot of us have heard about the prospect of retiring the 747s. Could that be useful for you in any way?
Yeah, so there's definitely plans afoot that we will one day have our own based here in Cornwall. The market's not quite there yet. We don't think the market's there. What we need to do is prove we can launch, prove there's a market, and then I think when we get to a certain point where we're doing, the minute we're looking at one launch in the first year, 3, 4, 5, building till about 8. Once we hit that point, maybe in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, then that's when we'll start to look at it. But what's been interesting about that is we've had 4 of them come into the airport in the last week. And it's been very, very good for us because it's showing how we handle them at the airport, what we might need. It's actually looking at cost savings of things we might not need now. And actually that's been really, really useful, unexpectedly useful. So there's been a bit, the aviation industry is dire at the minute. We know that. And so we're just looking at how can space and spaceports potentially help in any way with that. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, there's talks about it.
Now, there's several questions from Donald Boyd, David, and Pat about concerns about space clutter. And how is there any regulation about all these satellites that are going to be in orbit around the Earth?
Yeah, so really hot topic. Every conference I go to has a bit on space debris. We had actual Prince Charles came down a couple of years ago, and it's the first thing he said to us as well. And Unfortunately, space debris up until this point, there's never been an impetus for companies to really take responsibility for it. So you could put your system up, your satellite up, and not have a deorbiting plan and not really worry about, could be up there for, 50, 60 years. And what's changing is that impetus to take responsibility, maybe from a corporate social responsibility side, but also from a monetary side, because the more satellites you put up, the higher likelihood is they're going to hit other things. And the more that humans are going up, well, it just takes one tiny microsatellite to hit and cause major damage. So there's suddenly now this impetus, and what you're seeing now in the industry is this almost panic to figure out, how do we deal with this? So we work with some amazing UK companies that are looking at just incredible ways of clearing up the debris. But that doesn't stop that fact that loads of new satellites, cough, cough, SpaceX, are putting up at the minute. And so when I was speaking earlier about ethical framework, so what's a spaceport's role in maybe working with the launch operator to look at, well, what's your deorbiting plan for your satellites? What is your role in space debris, and being responsible for that? Because as a spaceport, we're not actually physically putting, we're not the satellite company, we're not the launch company, but we're the gateway. And I think there's a level of responsibility that these gateways need to start to have about what they are putting up there. So watch this space. Well, pun, it always happens. Yeah, it's a hot topic. It's not going anywhere, and things are definitely going to have to be done about it. And our role in that is starting to ask that question of the people that we're launching.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Rona, thank you very much for being the question meister tonight. You did a sterling job as usual.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was still quite a few there, Melissa, but we had to take a decision to stop there. Can I just take this opportunity to thank you, Melissa, for a most interesting, inspiring talk.
Thank you.
We had a long-standing member, Arthur Milnes, who sadly passed away 2 months ago, aged 90 years, and he would have loved this presentation.
Oh. Well, definitely would have loved to have virtually met him, but
yeah, he would have had a good few questions for you. What the future holds for us all, goodness only knows, but I'm sure it's important for our country, our countries, to be at the forefront of developing these technologies and also in the application of them. Anyway, Melissa, normally you'd be receiving a token of our appreciation and a thank you card designed and printed by Pauline. You'll still get these, except we'll just send them to you the old-fashioned way.
Okay, that's exciting, actually. Getting mail that's not bills, that's exciting.
Oh, I know, it's fun. It's fun opening something. It's not an Amazon parcel.
Yeah.
Also, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
And I hope you can stay with us and experience the rest of our club meeting, because you're in for a treat.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting a Cornish spaceport to talk to you guys as well.
Yeah, you're picking up a bit of a Cornish Canadian twang there, you know.
Oh, I don't even know. It's a hybrid of something.
Right. And now on to the club news, Astro picks and targets for the month. Pauline's here again to tell you what the club's been getting up to, show you some stunning photographs taken by us enthusiastic amateurs, and not least what to look for in the autumn night sky. So Pauline, over to you.
Right, good evening everyone. Andromeda is our constellation this month, and autumn sees Andromeda high in the sky, close to the zenith, which is of course the point directly above you in the sky. And this is how the sky should look between about 8 and 9 in the evening this month. Now she's got Cassiopeia above her, and that's probably the easiest way to locate Andromeda. Mars is below, and she shares a star with the square of Pegasus. So I'm hoping from that you'll be able to find Andromeda quite easily. Now, unfortunately, she looks nothing like a beautiful princess, which she is supposed to represent, for she's the daughter of Queen Cassiopeia and King Cepheus. She was chained to a rock as a sacrifice to appease Cetus, the sea monster, who was terrorizing the coast, and this was to punish Cassiopeia. Until eventually she was rescued by Perseus, riding the white-winged horse Pegasus across the skies. Perseus held up the head of Medusa, whom he had just happened to have killed earlier that day, so that it looked straight into the eyes of Cetus, turning it to stone. The constellation itself is made up of 2 lines of 4 stars. Let me get my pointer. So we have them here. And the very first star forms the top left-hand corner of Pegasus. So this is a shared star, although actually it is assigned to Andromeda. And just to be aware, there are some other ways of depicting Andromeda in the sky. This one is very complicated, and it's one I come across quite a lot. I can't find half the stars, let alone remember the shape. Now, the stars in the lower line are brighter than those in the top line, which can be hard to see unless you have a dark sky. One of the stars which is of interest is Almach, or Gamma. Now, this is a triple star, but you'll only see 2 components. One is orange and one is blue, and it is very reminiscent of Albireo, and it's a very pretty sight in telescopes, because you will need a telescope to separate the stars. Now, the fainter blue star has a close 6th magnitude companion, but it might just be a little bit too close at the moment to resolve for a few years. But eventually, it will be possible to see all 3 components of this triple system. Upsilon isn't much to write home about, except that it's the first multi-planet system discovered around a star other than our sun, and that excludes the pulsar planets. This system is unusual in that it has 2 of its gas giants, and there's the 3rd one there. 2 of these gas giants have orbits that are tilted to the plane of their solar system by about 30 degrees, instead of being in a nice flat plane like our planets orbiting the sun, well, at least most of them are. Such a strange orientation has never been seen before in any other planetary system, although with the new Planet Finder spacecraft in space, who knows what they'll find. Probably the main thing we associate with the Andromeda constellation is the Andromeda Galaxy, or M31. Now, this is a spiral galaxy, very similar to our own, only it's a bit bigger. It lies 2.4 million light years away, and it's visible to the naked eye as a fuzzy object in the dark sky. And in fact, if you can see it with your naked eye, you are now looking at the furthest object that you can actually see, which is quite incredible if you think about it. It becomes more noticeable in binoculars and better still in small telescopes, but too high a power actually reduces contrast, and the fainter parts of the galaxy become more difficult to see. The full extent of the galaxy only becomes apparent on long exposure photographs, and now you can see the tightly wound spiral arms and the dust lanes. And what I always find astonishing is that if this galaxy was bright enough, it would cover 5 or 6 times the diameter of the full moon across the sky. Most of the galaxies are moving away from us, and this is all to do with the expansion of the universe, but there is a little area, and Andromeda is included in that, as well as Triangulum Galaxy, that are actually moving towards us. And Andromeda is approaching at a speed of about 250,000 miles per hour, and it'll collide with the Milky Way in about 4 billion years' time. And this is what astronomers think our view of the night sky will be as it gets closer. And you'll notice there are a lot of pink patches and a few blue bits. Well, this is the starbursts that will occur because the gravitational interactions are pushing together, compressing all the gas and dust so that we get a huge burst of new stars. Now, there are two satellite galaxies, M32 and M110. Both these galaxies need telescope to see them, of course, but they're also both elliptical. Now, this is a great photograph by Dave, and you can see M32 very clearly. But if you look at the enlarged image of M32, not from here, you'll notice that it doesn't look particularly elliptical. Well, if you could turn it round, then you would see the elongated view. And then the other galaxy, satellite galaxy, is M110 or NGC 205. And in Dave's photograph, you can actually see it looks elliptical here. And in a close-up view, we can see that it's definitely elongated. And M110 is larger than M32, but it's fainter because more of the light is spread out. And there are two ways of finding M31. You can use Cassiopeia. If you go for the second V, bisect it with this end part of the arrow slightly over to the left, go straight down, and you'll come to the Andromeda Galaxy. But the easiest way, I think, is to go to the top left-hand star of Pegasus, the one that's shared with Andromeda, and count along the bottom line of bright stars, 1, 2. Then count upwards, 1, 2, and then you'll come to the galaxy just beyond the second star. Now, if you're looking for the galaxy with your naked eye, you are going to have a dark sky, and that's when you'll see these stars more easily, because remember, they are quite faint. Take a bit of practice somewhat anyway, and you should manage to see or should manage to find the galaxy using this method with your binoculars. But it does take a little bit of practice. So spend some time. And once you've found Andromeda once, then it's easy peasy the next few times. And something else you can see with binoculars is NGC 752. And this is an open star cluster. It's a widely spread cluster of around 60 stars of magnitude 9 and fainter, seen easily in binoculars and especially a small telescope. Now, the reason the stars are widely spread is because this is an old cluster, and over time, clusters always disperse. So if you see a cluster of stars that's close together, you know you're looking at a young cluster. NGC 7662, right over here on the outskirts of Andromeda, is what's called the blue snowball, or a planetary nebula. And we'll get Eric to find this on his next session. It's very easy to see with a small telescope because it looks like a fuzzy but bright magnitude 9 blue-green star. If you use a larger telescope, you can see that it's elongated, and you will see a central hole. Now, if you've got the very big telescopes like Hubble, you'll see that the central hole is actually infilled with faint gas. But this is, of course, a planetary nebula, a dead star that's puffed off its outer layers. And these outer layers are illuminated by this white dwarf star, which is all that remains of the previous star. It's producing so much radiation, ultraviolet radiation, and is so bright that that is how you can see the outer gas layers of this planetary nebula. And then we've got NGC 891, which is also known as the Silver Sliver. This is an edge-on unbarred spiral galaxy. Now in small to medium telescopes, you will see a streak of light. And if you go a little bit larger, you will see a dust lane down the center. And that's exactly what we saw with Eric's telescope and camera setup. If we have a look at an image, a close-up by Hubble, it looks absolutely incredible with the detail. But this always reminds me of the inside of a worm with its gut and blood vessels and maybe nerve fibers coming off. But of course, you might want to remember it in a completely different way. And then we have, if we just go slightly over the border of Andromeda and go into Triangulum, you'll come to M33 the Triangulum Galaxy. And this is, again, worth looking for. Now, this is a lovely photograph, another one by Dave, and I should have pointed out the M31 photograph with the satellite galaxy. That was also by Dave. And M33 is an almost face-on spiral galaxy. It covers an area larger than our full moon, and yet, because its light is spread over such a wide area, it can be quite difficult to see as soon as you start boosting the power of the telescope. So it's seen best in binoculars, believe it or not, from a very dark sky site though, and also from small telescopes. But as usual, the best way to get to see this galaxy really clearly is to take a long exposure photograph. And then just over at the Andromeda border into Perseus, we come to M76, the Little Dumbbell Nebula, which is another planetary nebula. Through a small to medium telescope, you should see a little greeny glow, but it is the faintest object on Messier's list at magnitude 10. So you need a telescope to see it. As soon as you start getting into the very large telescopes with different filters, different wavelengths of light, then you can get some rather gorgeous images. And now we're going to have a quick look at Astronomy Week, which is going to take place on the 14th to the 22nd of November, as Eric has been talking about. Now, November has been deliberately chosen because of Mars. And although Mars is now just past opposition, it's not at its absolute biggest and brightest, but it is still worth looking at the beginning of the month because it's still shining at magnitude -2.1. But what astonished me is how quickly it shrinks and therefore begins to fade, so that by the end of the month, it's only magnitude -1.2. However, what is good is that it gets higher in the sky and therefore moves away from all the thick atmosphere that we're looking at near the horizon. And therefore it doesn't shimmer and swim quite as much. So it should look a lot better in binoculars and telescopes and perhaps even cameras. Now there will be observing events from all over the country, and you can have a look on the website to see where they take place. Presumably, of course, if England's lockdown doesn't interfere with some of the observing sessions. And as Eric was talking about, he and Dave will be doing some live observing sessions during that week. So fingers crossed for clear skies. Also on the website, you will come across lots of articles about Mars, from its geology and current missions to the mythology surrounding the planet. Maybe they'll even say something about the salt lakes that they seem to have found underground at the pole. And there is also information about observing Mars and even choosing a telescope. But we've got very good articles on our website by Anthony all about choosing telescopes. So I would hope that you would refer to those. Other planets, well, we've got Mercury making an appearance in the morning sky. And this is how you would see the morning sky at about 40 minutes before sunrise. So for goodness sake, if you are searching for Mercury with binoculars, be very aware of the sun rising because it won't be long. Mercury will reach an altitude of around 11 degrees. So you're going to need a clear southeastern horizon. And you'll also notice that Venus is gradually getting lower, but not any dimmer. And of course, the latest news has been that phosphine gas has been found in the atmosphere. The question is this biological in origin, or is it geological or chemical? The fact that there is quite a lot of gas points to it being biological in origin. So who knows? But watch the space, because there should be some more information coming through once they begin sending more spacecraft to Venus. So that's an impetus to get there again. Saturn and Jupiter should be, are still visible in the southwest, getting lower in the sky. Saturn becomes a little more difficult to see because it's sinking into the twilight here, but it's getting darker at night. And at our latitude, it gets darker a lot earlier. So we should manage to see Saturn and Jupiter all the way through November and hopefully into December, because on the 21st of December, we have a Christmas star. There's going to be a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn. This will be the closest conjunction since 1623, and at their closest, they will only be 0.1 of a degree apart. And there won't be another conjunction until 2080. So this is the one to look for. So on the 21st of November at 5:30, this is what you would expect in the sky. And exactly a month later, at around 5 o'clock, you should see the two appearing to merge, but very low down. This is at 5, but we might actually be able to see it a little bit earlier than this because of our dark skies. Now, there are 2 meteor showers this month, and the good news is that neither should be interfered with by the moon. We have the North Torrid meteor shower peaking on the 11th and 12th of November. Only about 5 or so meteors an hour, but they're slow moving and they produce fireballs. So they are worth looking out for. This is a photograph taken by Joanna West from Arizona, which I pinched off the internet. And you can see the spectacular fireball, but also look at the Pleiades, because the Pleiades form a very convenient signpost to the radiant of the North Torrid. So if you look here, then you should see the meteors coming from this particular point. Now it says you can view from mid-evening, but most of these meteor showers tend to be best in the early morning. But I'm going to go for the mid-evening option. And then we have the Leonard meteor shower on the 17th and 18th of November is when it peaks. 10 to 15 meteors an hour, they're fast and bright, and again, convenient radiant, because it's right in the center of the Leo sickle head. If you're not sure where Leo is, find the plow, and straight through the bowl of the plow, you will come to Leo. But Leo doesn't rise until the early hours, so you'll need to wait until then before you can see the meteor shower, although you might see them poking up above the horizon. Not only do we have a peak night, but we also have a peak time, 5 o'clock in the morning, ideal for all those early risers. And then, of course, we've had the spacecraft OSIRIS-REx touching the surface of Bennu, gathering the material that it's managed to eject into the sampling head. This will be brought home or brought back to Earth by 2023. Bennu is an asteroid. It's a carbonaceous asteroid, so it's carbon rich. They have found veins of carbonate material in rocks on the surface. Now, Bennu is too small to have had flowing water at some point, so it must have been part of a much bigger asteroid at some point. But the fact that there was water in this vicinity makes the material that they're going to be analysing really interesting and very important for understanding our early solar system. So, club news. Now, Eric has already said welcome to Lorraine, but just to say again, if you receive emails from Lorraine, our new membership secretary, then you'll know that they are legit. And Eric has also mentioned the his live observing session that he did with Dave, and this took place on the Saturday night of the 24th of October, and it was absolutely incredible. It was live and it worked brilliantly. It was watched by people from Stornoway to North Ronaldsay, Thurso, Inverness, Glasgow, Brecon, and even Belgium. And you can watch the event on YouTube. And what I'll do is to put all this information into the bits and pieces that I shall send you. This is an amazing achievement for our amateur astronomy club and is enabling us to carry out our key aims of delivering practical observing astronomy and outreach during these strange COVID-19 times. Even the director of the British Astronomical Association, the Deep Sky section, Callum Potter, has asked how this has been achieved. And that is really something, because Callum Potter is pretty high up there and he knows a lot of stuff. So well done, Eric, and well done to Dave also for supporting Eric in this venture. All right, we have got your wonderful gallery of photographs and a few new names, which is nice. Alexandra Wright of North Ronaldsay is a new name, and she's sent in this particular photograph of a starry sky. I'm sure it's on purpose to make all us in light polluted area completely jealous of your wonderful dark skies. Here we have Dave's wonderful pictures of the moon, and I'm going to point out a few things. We've got Tycho crater, we have the Mare Imbrium, or the Imbrium Basin, Mare Serenitatis, I knew I'd get that wrong, and Mare Crisium. And you'll see the reason why I'm pointing them out, because here is the Tycho crater. Dave has also photographed the Mare Imbrium and Mare Serenitatis. And this is the Imbrium Basin, or the Mare Imbrium again, but you can see the really clear line of mountains around this impact crater and even lava flows across the surface. This is a wonderfully clear image, Dave. And this is one by Eric of the moon, and this is Mare Crisium. And again, you can see the edges of the impact crater, and it looks like there's nothing there. It looks like bits of rock just hanging in the space. But of course, this is because this area is in shadow. And once again, looks like you've got some lava flows over the sea there. We've got a lovely image of the crescent moon with Earthshine by Sue in North Ronaldsay. And again, the moon with Mars over here. And the moon, really ethereal, this image with Mars right over here. We have the Moon-Mars conjunction, which took place on the 29th of October. There's Mars. This is a photograph by Eric. And we have got exactly the same, but of course separated because Michael is way over in Sigma area, Elgin area. And there is Mars. And then we have the following night, there was this wonderful ring around the moon. And we have got 3 photographs of it. So this one is by Dave, and you can see Mars here. This one is by Mick. Mars is in the same place. And lastly, by Eric. Absolutely incredible photographs. Now, this is my attempt of Mars. And this is with my mobile phone. And then I enlarged the well, when you have the mobile phone, you can enlarge the image. And I took a photograph, and this is what I got. Now, it clearly shows a disk, which is what you would hope when looking at Mars, but it also looks as though I've captured some dark markings. Whether this is an artifact or not, I don't know. But until I know better, I'm going to congratulate myself, because I'm rather impressed myself, basically. Lovely image of Mars. You've got the beautiful orange color. And this one is by Dave, a close-up of Mars. But this one by Eric is quite incredible. You've got these wonderful markings on Mars. It's the same photograph, but it's been tweaked in slightly different ways to bring out these dark areas on Mars. And then we've got Saturn, Jupiter, and the Moon by Sue. And a really atmospheric photograph of the sun at sunrise with sunspots by Dave. And apparently there is a very large sunspot just appearing on the sun. And as it makes its way towards the center of the sun, with any luck, it may spark some auroras. So look out for those in the next couple of weeks. Another newcomer is Mark from Stornoway Astronomical Association, and we have this wonderful picture of the Andromeda Galaxy with M32 and M110 on over this side here. And Dave has taken an image of M42, or the Great Orion Nebula. It's absolutely incredible. It's so detailed, and it's exquisite. And another incredible photograph, this one by Sue, of a moonbow. And it's not just one moonbow, it's a double moonbow with that dark area in between. These are rare. You need certain circumstances in order to be able to take a picture. Those circumstances were met Sunday night. The moon was still very bright, and we had a number of showers. So I just stood at the window and looked, and was eventually rewarded with a faint moonbow. Whenever I've seen them, they are always tend to be shades of grey, because of course we don't pick up colour at night. But with the camera, you can actually see very subtle shades of colour in this, and it's just an amazing photograph. And now we have a series of Aurora photographs. So I'm going to shut up, apart from a couple of things I'm going to say. So these are by Ian Hall. And then we have Alexandra. And you can see the plough quite clearly. And you'll notice the plough very often in Aurora photographs, because the plough is in the north. And of course, the pointers are pointing to Polaris, which is off the top of this picture. And that's why, and that's a proof that the aurora occurs in the northern sky. And another newcomer, Shian Tarrant of North Ronaldsay. I love the hole in the standing stone. What incredible pictures these are. Oh, you're very lucky living in North Ronaldsay. So thank you very much, everyone, and again for your continued support.
Thank you very much once again for that. That was fantastic. What splendid targets you've given us to aim for. And all those beautiful astrographs, they are just stunning.
I know.
And you definitely get the credit for photographing the surface markings on Mars. Definitely get that. Anthony stuck a comment in the Q&As, and he just reminded us that NGC 891, the silver sliver as you call it, is sometimes called the Outer Limits Galaxy because it featured in the end credits of that.
Ah.
So he must also be of that certain age. So I'm just going to round off the evening. Pete Sherman mentioned something about the quiz. He says he'll send information and registration details about the quiz later next week. There's no need to email him directly. People just need to choose who they want to team up with, and everything will be done through the registration process. So hopefully that clarifies something. And there was also a question earlier on about whether we would have any observing sessions in December. Unfortunately, we won't be doing that at the observatory itself, but we are definitely holding them via the YouTube webcast. Just keep an eye on your email inbox, Facebook, or our website for notice of them. The notice can be very short, especially if we happen to just get an opportunistic weather window on the day. But because Dave, myself, James, Polly and Rowan, there's a few of us that are available, we can get the observing session up and running. So that's how we're going to be doing it for the foreseeable future. Anyway, I think that's about it for tonight. I just want to thank you all for coming along. There was a big attendance tonight, so thank you very much for making the effort and letting people know. I just want to thank you for being part of the club, being part of North of Scotland Amateur Astronomy. Clear skies, keep your heads up.